My mom raised her glass at dinner, smiled sweetly, and said, "Your card got declined again, honey." Then, in front of everyone, she announced she wasn't paying for my wedding anymore. I thought it was a joke, until I found out she had already canceled the venue behind my back. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most, if you've ever been made to feel small when all you wanted was love and support, then hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about rebuilding your power when your own family tries to take it away. My name is Emma, I'm 26 years old, and I work as a junior graphic designer at a small marketing firm. I've spent the last 3 years saving every extra dollar I could, skipping nights out, taking freelance jobs, even selling old clothes, just to plan the wedding of my dreams. Nothing extravagant, nothing over the top. I just wanted something beautiful and meaningful. My parents had promised they'd help with the venue costs. It wasn't my idea to ask, they offered. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Mom had said, "You've always been so responsible, Emma. You deserve something special." I believed her. I thought this was finally the time my family would show up for me the way they always did for my younger sister, Chloe. See, Chloe was the golden child. The kind of daughter who failed 3 classes but still got a new car for her birthday. The kind of sister who barely held a job for a month but got designer handbags, just because. Meanwhile, I was the one who did everything right, and somehow, that made me less deserving. When I got good grades, Mom said, "Well, Emma's just naturally smart." When I landed my first job, she said, "Emma's independent. She doesn't need help like Chloe." It was like every achievement I made was used as an excuse not to care about me. But my wedding? That was supposed to be different. That was supposed to be my day. It happened at a fancy restaurant. Mom had invited me, Dad, Chloe, and a few aunts and uncles to finalize the wedding details. I was nervous but excited. I thought we were going to discuss flower arrangements, maybe pick between chicken or fish for the menu. Then Mom cleared her throat and tapped her wine glass. "Everyone," she said, smiling that too perfect smile, "I have an announcement about Emma's wedding." My heart jumped. Finally, I thought. Finally, she's going to show everyone how proud she is. She looked around the table, took a sip of wine, and said, "We've decided the money we set aside for Emma's wedding is going to Chloe's graduation trip to Europe instead." The room fell silent. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. I stared, waiting for her to say she was joking. But she just kept going. "It's an emergency," she continued, not even looking at me. "Chloe needs this experience before she starts her career." I could feel everyone's eyes on me. My stomach twisted. "Mom," I said quietly, "what about the venue deposit? The caterer? The photographer?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, sweetie, Emma's always been so independent," she said to the table, like I wasn't even there. "She doesn't need our help like Chloe does." My Aunt Susan nodded, smiling. "You're so practical, Emma. You'll figure it out." I clenched my fists under the table. "But I've already paid deposits. The vendors are booked. The invitations." "Oh, about that," Mom interrupted, slicing into her steak. "I already called the venue and cancelled. Got most of the deposit back." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto my plate. "You what?" I whispered. She smiled like this was all a teachable moment. "It's a lesson in financial responsibility, honey. You can't just expect people to fund your circus." That's when Uncle Mike laughed. "Kids these days think weddings have to cost a fortune," he chuckled, shaking his head. I wanted to disappear. I could feel my face burning as everyone nodded in agreement, pretending like they were on her side just to avoid the awkwardness. Within minutes, half the table had made excuses to leave. I sat there in silence while my family finished their expensive dinner, talking about Chloe's trip as if my shattered wedding plans were a joke they'd already forgotten. I didn't cry there. I waited until I got home, then I sat on the kitchen floor and sobbed until my throat was raw. The humiliation didn't end that night. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw something that made my blood run cold. My parents were throwing Chloe an engagement party. She wasn't even engaged. The post said, "Celebrating Chloe's pre-engagement glow." Whatever that meant. And the caption? "So proud of our girl and all her milestones this year." I wasn't invited. I wasn't even mentioned. Then came the grocery store incident. I was standing in line with a basket full of ramen, discount bread, and instant coffee. My new wedding budget diet. I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Oh, Emma's wedding was getting too extravagant anyway," my mom was saying. "We had to step in and be the adults." It was Mrs. Rodriguez, our old neighbor, she was talking to. Mrs. Rodriguez glanced at me, pity in her eyes. "Such a shame when young people don't live within their means," she said. I wanted to disappear right there between the frozen peas and the ice cream. The final straw came a few days later when Dad called. "Emma, honey, we need a favor," he said casually. "What kind of favor?" I asked, already wary. "Could you design Chloe's graduation party invitations? You know, since you're so good at that stuff. You want me to work for free?" "It's family," he said, like that explained everything. "Besides, consider it practice for when you start your own little business." My own little business. Like my actual career, my 9-to-5 job, was just a hobby. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the vendor contracts spread out in front of me. The savings account that had taken me years to build was draining fast. Jake, my fiancé, sat beside me, rubbing my back gently. "Maybe we should just elope," he said softly. I shook my head. No, the word came out sharper than I meant it. "I'm not running away. Not this time." He looked at me curiously. "Then what are you thinking?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm thinking they don't know me as well as they think they do." What my family didn't know was that I'd been freelancing on weekends for the past 2 years. Logo designs, invitations, branding work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And little by little, I had built up an emergency fund. They thought I was a struggling junior designer who couldn't survive without their help. They had no idea that I'd been saving for my independence all along. They also didn't know that I'd been documenting everything. Screenshots of texts, emails, messages, every broken promise. I had proof of every time they favored Chloe, every time they lied to make me look ungrateful. But the thing they really didn't know was the call I'd made a week earlier, to Jake's aunt Patricia. Patricia was a powerhouse. She owned her own event planning company and had built it from scratch after her own family betrayed her years ago. When she heard what happened, she didn't hesitate. "Let me help you throw a wedding that'll make them eat their words," she said. "But here's the catch. We do it without them. No invitations. No updates. Nothing." I agreed without hesitation. While my parents posted photos of Chloe's shopping spree for Europe, Patricia and I met with vendors in secret. We picked a venue, designed decorations, and planned something truly magical. Simple, elegant, and ours. They thought they had broken me. But all they'd really done was set the stage for the sweetest revenge of my life. While my parents bragged online about rewarding Chloe for her hard work with shopping sprees and luggage sets, I was spending every free moment building my dream. One that no one could cancel this time. Patricia and I met in quiet cafes, whispered over color palettes and floral arrangements, and exchanged secret Pinterest boards like spies planning a mission. Every meeting, every phone call, was a little act of rebellion. I wasn't just planning a wedding anymore. I was reclaiming my life. The venue Patricia found was breathtaking. A small botanical garden with a glass-ceiling conservatory filled with wildflowers and natural light. It wasn't the massive ballroom my mom had picked, but it was perfect. Peaceful. Private. Ours. Jake was supportive through it all, quietly proud every time I told him about another detail falling into place. "You don't need them to make it perfect," he said one night as we reviewed our guest list. "Friends, colleagues, and people who actually cared about us. You're doing this exactly right." For the first time, I felt like I was creating something that was mine, untouched by my family's manipulation or judgment. 2 weeks before our secret wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some old family photos I wanted to include in our ceremony. I wasn't planning to stay long, but when I walked in, I heard my mom's voice drifting from the kitchen. "Emma will just have to learn," she was saying. "Maybe this will teach her not to dream so big." I froze. My father's voice followed. "Should we get Chloe something for her pre-trip celebration? Maybe those diamond earrings she liked." They both laughed softly. Like this was normal. Like crushing my dream wedding and funding my sister's vacation was responsible parenting. I walked out quietly before they could see me. I didn't say a word. Because at that moment, I realized something. Their approval had never brought me happiness. And their rejection? It couldn't hurt me anymore. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. Elegant cardstock, expensive font, the kind of design I would have been proud of if it weren't for what it said. You're invited to celebrate Chloe's European adventure. Please bring a homemade dessert to share. Even in her glory, Chloe couldn't resist a potluck. I laughed when I read it. The irony was perfect. They wanted me to bake for another one of Chloe's self-congratulatory events, using my wedding money. But that night, as Jake and I looked through our final wedding photos, flowers arranged, rings ready, vows printed, I realized I was ready for something even better than revenge. I was ready for closure. The day of Chloe's European adventure party was warm and loud, the kind of summer afternoon that almost dares you to make a scene. Their house was packed. Relatives, neighbors, everyone my parents wanted to impress. The living room was a glittery explosion of gold streamers and travel-themed decorations. When I walked in, heads turned. My mom smiled like she just remembered I existed. "Emma made the most amazing cake," she announced proudly, gesturing toward the 3-tier masterpiece I was holding. She had no idea what else I'd brought. "Thanks," I said, setting it down on the table. "Actually, I have some news to share too." The room quieted. Aunt Susan, sipping champagne, leaned forward. "Oh, did you finally set a new wedding date? Something a bit more realistic this time." I smiled. "Actually, Jake and I got married last weekend." You could have heard a pin drop. Mom blinked. "What? Beautiful ceremony," I said, pulling out my phone. "At the Botanical Gardens. Small. Intimate. Perfect." Dad frowned. "With what money?" I swiped through the photos. Patricia had captured every moment. The glowing fairy lights, the first dance, the laughter. "You taught me to be independent," I said calmly. "So I learned to depend on myself instead of promises." I could see the color drain from my mother's face. "But we're your family," she whispered. "We should have been there." "Family shows up," I said, locking eyes with her. "You chose not to." Chloe looked between us, speechless. "Emma, I didn't know," she stammered. "Of course you didn't," I said quietly. "You never ask about anything that isn't about you." The silence that followed was heavy. Years of unspoken tension crashing all at once. I continued, my voice steady. "The wedding was beautiful. Patricia helped plan it. Jake's aunt. You remember her, right? The one you said was too fancy for people like us? Turns out she specializes in helping people when their families let them down." Mom's eyes welled with tears. Not the dainty, sympathetic ones she cried at Chloe's graduations, but ugly, desperate tears. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "We'll plan another ceremony. Something proper." "No." That single word stopped her cold. "You can't fix years of choosing her over me," I said. "You can't fix teaching me that love has to be earned while handing it to her for free." Dad reached out. "Emma, please." I picked up my purse, slinging it over my shoulder. "Enjoy the cake," I said. "I made it myself. Just like everything else in my life." And then I walked out. That night, my phone blew up with calls and messages. Aunt Susan, suddenly apologetic. Dad, rambling voicemails about misunderstandings. Even Chloe sent a long, confused text about how she never wanted this to happen. I didn't reply to any of them. For the first time in years, the silence didn't sting. It felt liberating. Patricia texted later, "I bet they'll never forget that party." I smiled. "Neither will I." It's been 8 months since that day. Jake and I celebrated our first Thanksgiving with Patricia and some close friends. No drama, no guilt, just laughter and peace. My parents call sometimes, but I don't answer. They even sent a Christmas card to our new address. I threw it away unopened. As for Chloe, she got back from Europe broke and unemployed. Turns out traveling the world doesn't build a work ethic or self-awareness. Meanwhile, my freelance business has exploded. I'm not just a junior designer anymore. I'm running my own brand. It's funny how much you can accomplish when you're no longer trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. I used to think family was about blood. Now I know, it's about who shows up when it matters. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Have you ever had to stand up to your own family? Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this, because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace.